Scott. I'm the sports editor at the Canadian Press. And my colleague Jennifer Quinn and my colleague Shauna Richard. Jennifer Quinn is the sports editor at the Toronto Star. She's out there. And my colleague Shauna Richard is the sports editor at the Globe and Mail. And another colleague of ours, Emma Marshall, is not here tonight, unfortunately. She's a communications professional in sports media. So the four of us got together and decided that there is a lot more women getting into our business, which is fantastic, but not necessarily a lot of places where they can go to talk about the industry and some of the challenges we face, and also some of the things that we enjoy about our jobs and that sort of thing. So we started this organization. We're very grassroots, as you can maybe tell. We are here at Ryerson tonight, and we thank Ryerson very much for helping us out with this space. And April and her colleague Jacqueline, we're really, really grateful to them for helping us get going. This is, as I said, the first sort of formal event we've done, so it's a bit new to us. And so we thank you all for coming and being here in the Ven, I believe they call it, is the name of this space. So we really are happy to have everyone here. I'm also a Ryerson graduate, class of 1992. And it's my first time back here in this building since then, so it's pretty cool to be back. And Jennifer also graduated with me, so it's been kind of fun just to be back at the school and see how things have changed. So without further ado, I'll get on with our introductions here. I'm going to introduce Norma Wick, who is going to be our moderator for the evening. First of all, a little quick housekeeping about our routine here. We will have a moderated conversation with Norma for 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open the floor to questions, and you guys can toss as many questions at us, at our panel as you like, and I'm sure they will all have brilliant answers for you. First of all, a little bit about Norma. For those of you who don't know Norma, she started in media back in 1986, and she spent 11 seasons, I believe, covering the NBA, including 6 with the Raptors for NBA TV and Raptors TV as well, and has since transitioned into teaching and is now working at the College of Sports Media, where I think some of her students are here tonight. Thank you very much for being with us. We really are really thrilled to see you here. And so Norma is going to, I'm going to hand it off to her. She's going to handle things for the rest of the evening, and we look forward to hearing from everybody with your questions and have some good conversation. Thank you.
So I apologize, I'm going to probably read from some notes, but before we get into the panel discussion, I just wanted to thank Julie, Jen, Shauna, and Emma, and all the women that supported the idea and brought it to fruition of getting women, and I see some men from our industry together to network, help each other, support each other, drink wine, socialize and swap stories about an incredibly rewarding and sometimes, at times, incredibly frustrating profession. But, and I want to maybe just start off with just a quick story about one of those frustrating days. I used to call it my rock-kicking days. And it was very early in my career, and one of my male colleagues took me aside and put his arm around me and said, "Let me give you some advice." He said, first of all, he said, don't look for a mentor, you don't have one. And nobody's going to take you under their wing. Number 2, don't expect anybody else to look after your best interests. That's your job. And number 3, whatever you do, don't get down on yourself. You know why? Because no one gives it. And it was pretty good advice, actually, mostly. But some of it, 26 years later, doesn't hold entirely true. And the fact that we're all gathered here tonight and the fact that we have this organization, WINS, is proof that we are sort of moving forward. And there are, at least now, a lot of women that have a depth of experience that they can share with other people. And we can support, help each other, network, possibly scheme. Socialize, again, socializing is great because there's a lot of really dynamic women and in this industry, and they have a lot to say, and there is a lot that we can do for each other and help each other going forward. And I use the word dynamic because the definition of it is, as a noun, let me read this, a force that stimulates change or progress. And we've got three very talented and dynamic women here on the panel that represent where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And that is certainly true, the word dynamic, of the pioneers and the groundbreakers, like Jane O'Hara, to my immediate or far left. Jane was a trailblazer for female sports journalists in Canada. In the 1970s, she worked as a sports reporter at the Toronto, I have to read this because it's very lengthy. In 1989, she became the first woman to run a sports section at a major Canadian daily when she took over as sports editor at the Ottawa Sun. A former competitive tennis player, Jane has also been an investigative journalist and bureau chief, written books, taught journalism, and worked as a political consultant. There's more, but for the interest of time, I'm sure we'll get Jane to expand a little bit more on her career as well. On the opposite end of the spectrum is Megan Robinson in the middle, and Megan is a reporter for the Sportsnet 590 The Fan, covering the Blue Jays, Maple Leafs, and Raptors, along with all the other major sports events in Toronto. A graduate of Ryerson's radio and television arts program. The year?
2011.
Yay! Megan has been with the Fan since 2013. Prior to that, she spent 3 years in Calgary covering the Flames, Hitmen, and Roughnecks for Sportsnet.ca and Sportsnet 960 The Fan. And Sherry Ford, speaking of Calgary, we have some roots there. She's the Toronto reporter for TSN and can be seen regularly filing reports on major sports stories in the GTA, including the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, and the Toronto Argonauts. Sherry first joined TSN in 1998 as SportsCenter's Calgary correspondent. In 2002, Ford moved to Toronto to work as a sports anchor and reporter for CFTO News before rejoining TSN in 2003. A native of Brooks, Alberta, Ford has worked in sports, radio, and television and print since 1987, and she's covered some of the biggest sports stories, including 2 Super Bowls, 3 Olympics, multiple Grey Cups, NHL playoffs, NBA and MLB All-Star games, and I'm sure a variety of other things. And she's also the mother of 2. So welcome to the panel. We're really glad to have you guys all here. And before we get kind of into the hows and whats, I just wanted to just go to each of you, maybe starting with Jane, and just ask you, we'll start with the why. Why are you here tonight? Why did you feel compelled to come and share some of your experiences?
Julie Scott would kill me if I didn't. No, Julie asked me, and of course I said yes. Why? Because, well, sports has been a big part of my life, and I was sure tonight that I would come here since I was started out in business before most of the people in this room were born. And I thought tonight this whole thing would be completely different, but having had a little bit of a chit chat with Megan here, maybe it's not so different as it was when I was doing sports. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say and just be part of it. It's a great organization.
And similar to Jane, I think, being able to sit here alongside 2 people that have had storied careers and continue to have storied careers before me, there was really nobody and nothing like this when I wanted to get into this business. And I graduated in 2011, but started in sports 4 years prior to that. And there was nobody. And there was no mentor. There was no woman to say, here you go, it's going to be a lot harder than what you think it's going to be, but you've got to tough it out. And I was given some terrible advice by, a lot of people that really didn't know. So for those of you who want to be in sports, I hope that you trust that we're being honest with you and we're going to give you a genuine look about what it's actually like.
Great, sure.
Not as pride, I want.
It's all about the wine, the socializing, I mean.
I have lots of stories to tell. I don't know if many of them are child appropriate for this room, but I've been around the block a few times, and TV's a different dynamic than print. And I love to share my stories, and I love to talk to the young girls and young women going into the industry today. Give them a bit of an inside view of what there is and how much hair you have to have on your chest to tough it out.
You know, it's, Megan, you kind of touched on it, but it's harder than you thought. And I'm imagining that Jane, when you started out, first of all, just talk about what was the landscape like as a woman stepping into sports? Like what talk about the opening that you got.
Okay, well, I started in business around 1973, 74, right? I told you weren't alive. It was, now, it also happened that it may have been a bit of a golden era, I mean, not a golden era, but maybe for print. Because Blacksford was also writing sports. In fact, she had a column. I think Rosie was around then too. And I was at the Sun, and they were different papers. So what was it like? Well, first of all, you were really the only person, the only woman at most events. I mean, with the exception if you ran into one of the other two. It was, now, I always thought I had an advantage because I grew up with 5 brothers. So being in a room full of men did not really strike me as anything odd since I grew up with roomfuls of men, right? And I also think that having played tennis, I got some respect from the other athletes. But bottom lining it, when I started, with the exception of being sent out for a couple of great, you know, feature stories with big athletes, I was covering all the sort of shit sports. Now, by that I don't mean, put it this way, I was not covering the Leafs or, you know, Raptors we're here about, but, or any of the big events. I was doing things like curling, always late at night, nasty sport. I'd go out to the racetrack and do, you know, the trotters late at night. I mean, I had some really bad assignments. On the other hand, I kind of like the whole thing, so I'm not really complaining about it, and you have to start somewhere, so. But that was kind of the landscape. You were, you know, you go into a newsroom which was filled with men. But in all departments, not just sports, right?
Yeah.
You know, except for maybe lifestyles and arts or something, there'd be a few women who were always on secretaries and all, so. But the whole newspaper business was kind of filled with guys.
Did you feel what was the attitude of your colleagues towards you initially?
Well, first of all, let me just tell you, the first story I had to do, which is kind of odd, I was playing in the Canadian Tennis Championships. And I had to write a story about losing from them, and then I was from there on covering the tennis. Okay, fine. So, and I just got killed by Margaret Court in the second round. So anyway, I wrote that story. And now, okay, so this is really, I've had almost no experience whatsoever. And we're at the finals, and it's Ili Nastasi, anybody heard of him, and Bjorn Borg. Fine. It's the finals of the Canadian Open, they're on television, whatever. And Ili Nastasi, gets something up his nose, and he decides he's going to tank. And he doesn't tank in some subtle way. He tanks by like hitting the balls like 80 feet in the air, and like not even running for anything, and like it was sort of 0-0 for Borg. Okay, that was a big story, right? Even though I didn't quite know it at the time. But it was a big story. I hadn't got a clue what to do. So a good friend of mine who's in the business, not a good friend of mine, she covered me in tennis, Nora McKay. I said, Nora, now what do we do? And she said, follow me. So she really helped me out my first assignment. But I could have been fired after that because I really didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. And now, because I sort of took the junior cub route as well. I sort of worked my way, I didn't go to Ryerson. So I worked my way up into it as well. So there's a lot of paying your dues, hard knocks, and all that stuff. But Megan, you were talking about, you know, when you started out and talking about it being difficult. So what were the challenges that you felt you faced initially?
Not as much. I mean, obviously there were a lot more women around. And, you know, I was an intern and I was given beats of sorts and not paid for my work because I was told very much that I had to pay my dues, that I had to get coffee if I wanted to be a reporter, and I had to, you know, shadow TV producers and get their lunch and that sort of thing, and I did that. No questions asked, anything that they needed.
But I was also the person that, did a lot of prep work if I wanted to go somewhere and felt that I had to over-prepare because I always felt I needed to prove something. There was a lot of, you're not going to make it in radio because you sound too much like a girl. Someone suggested to me that I start smoking because at the time, when I was 17, I very much sounded like a young 17-year-old. Of course I did, though. So that was tough, and something that I kind of got to go through. But once I graduated university, I took off immediately to Calgary. And I spent some time in Calgary covering the beats there, just like Sherry did. And it wasn't that long ago. And it was a very different thing, but I still very much had to be the lowest on the totem pole and prove to people every single day that I wanted to be there, that I did my homework, and that I was okay being called kiddo by people that were around for 20 years. And I work with Sherry all the time. I still get that, and I'm okay with that because, yes, junior, I'm sorry. Because I respect and I recognize that there are people like Sherry and like Jane who have paved a way so that it's not that they don't expect a woman, they expect a woman. I think sometimes though it's just tougher to deal with a woman than a man.
Was there a seminal moment when you decided that this is what I want to do? What was in your brain that made you pursue it?
The night that Jerome McGinley was traded from Calgary, I was in sports, and then in the off season of the Flames, I was covering the crime beat in Calgary, which was amazing if you've ever covered crime. And it was really neat because I had been in sports for, say, 6 years or so at that point, doing a lot of filing to various websites and on various beats. But at that moment, I was the expert. And I was on Toronto radio. I was called to be a guest on places. And I remember just feeling like, you know what? I got this. This is great. Like, this is what I really want to do. And I made a push from that point because I knew I had always wanted to do sports, and I have my various reasons for that, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, that's what I was asking. Just
Oh, yeah.
So, like at the very start, what was it? Because Jane mentions growing up with brothers and
Right.
being athletic, so you're already kind of steeped in that. You loved it. So, did you grow up being athletic?
I did. Yeah. My first introduction with sports was baseball, and it was on the radio. And listening to Tom Cheek and Jerry Howard, my nana, and I have this radio now. I have this red battery-powered radio that only gets AM. And I used to sit with my papa at the front of their house or the back of their house in the summertime and listen to baseball games. And I was playing baseball around 3 or 4 years old, and that was my first summer love. I really loved it, and I loved, hearing the crack of the bat and hearing the way that they would just describe everything that would go on. It was that I knew I wanted to be part of, to be able to tell that story and be a messenger to people like me who were listening or watching at home. So it was definitely that from the moment of my life.
And how about you, Sherry?
Well, I never had the high voice, so I was never told to get up. Much like you, a very male-dominated world. I'm from the farm, and my father raised me as his son, and he called me his son, and he introduced me as his son, so I was very used to that. I played a lot of sports. I rodeoed. I think my favorite moments when I was young, my father was a veterinarian and a farmer, and he worked very hard, and he was never at home. And on Saturday nights, he'd come home and he'd sit in the recliner and he'd watch Hockey Night in Canada. And I'd go to the fridge and get his little wee stubby and we'd, open it up and I could have sips of his beer. And it was the only time that I really had his attention for any, matter of quality time. And so I think that's when my love of sports came. Of course, I was an agriculture reporter for 5.5 years first. And in Saskatchewan, I moved from Alberta to Saskatchewan. That was a huge beat in Saskatchewan. I was the queen, let me tell you. I was rodeo king too, actually. I digress, but I
Was the rodeo the joint
yeah,
circus?
exactly. Yeah. I was the egg bag in Regina, and if I could stress to any of you students out there working in the small towns, I worked in Medicine Hat, I worked in Regina, I worked on radio, I worked in print. I did everything in the small towns, and I learned hard in the small towns. And we were like family, the people that worked in those small places, and we didn't make any money, and we just had a great time, and we got to learn all our mistakes. And I find that the journalists of today that come out of journalism school, they want to go right to Toronto.
Big market.
And they want to, and missing out. And I know there's not a lot of small markets left, I understand that. If you can find one, it is something special. And I look back on those days as the best days of my life. And then I went from agriculture. Anytime there was a sports story, then I knew something about like curling. Because I'm a farm girl, so there was curling or there was figure skating, and I pushed my way into that. And I really, really, really hustled to try to shove my way into sports, because I did not want to be an agricultural reporter forever. I loved it, but I needed out. And so I hustled, and I did things, and I pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed. And there were no women, really. There was a handful around the country, really. And I couldn't see them for the most part, because I didn't have cable at home, and I had 2 channels. And I think I had 1 AM station, the only FM station was out in Vancouver, so you could hear it, you put your antenna just the right way. So there were no role models as such. So I paved my way a lot in the TV areas, and I found that just hustling and selling your soul a little bit, if I could say that. There weren't a lot of men that wanted to help me, that's for sure. They saw me as a threat because I was young, because I was a female, because females were starting to come on board. And there's still a few that won't talk to me because I did take their job eventually. And again, that wasn't my fault, it was just the way that it went. And so that's probably where
It's interesting because most people we talk to, like whether it's you and your brothers and being athletic yourself, and you with your nan on the radio, and you with your dad, a lot of people end up in this, men and women, because of a relationship that they've had. It's a way of being close to your dad. It's a way of spending time with a grandparent. It's also part of the landscape of your youth because you're athletic and stuff. And a lot of, I think, what we're talking about in terms of paying dues is not uncommon to men either. Guys have to pay their dues too. But how important would you say it is, regardless of whether you're graduating from Ryerson or you're coming from, you know, just being out there saying, I love this and I want to get into this, how important would you say is it that you must love sports?
Probably a lot, actually. I'm just thinking of other things I've covered, and I love those too.
The hows and the whys and the background of people and what makes people tick and how did that play out on, you know, whatever surface you're watching a game on, or and is that something that women can bring to the table that maybe is a little bit different from men?
I find a question line from a woman is far different, far softer, far, not saying that they don't have an edge in their question line, but they know how to, they know how to word it so that they can get the, you know, that answer that they want, whereas we're not going, what did you do out there tonight? What did you know, why didn't you pass it there? Or why didn't, we don't do that. And I find women are softer and more methodical in their question line. I love a good story. It's half the reason why I got into sports, because there's so many wonderful stories out there to tell, and I find that in the small towns again, I was able to do those. I was able to cover the Western Canada Games. I was, you know, able to do small events like that compared to the big events now, where it is about winning and losing. And a good story will get me every time. Every time, like E60 on down, like I cry all the time watching. I have 9 TVs in my house, so yeah, I like watching sports. It's on it every Saturday. 9 TVs in my house, and all of my husband's a sports guy. My kids are in all sports, and they're always on. And so yeah, I think you have to have a passion for sports, but you have to have a respect for it. It's not, I love sports, I need to meet this athlete. Oh my God, no. I have a real respect for the agony of defeat, really, and just the beautiful stories that go along the way.
Is there something too about experiences that help you? Because, you know, when I meet young women who say, I like sports and I want to get into it, it's like, but you can't just like it, you have to love it and you have to know it. Mm-hmm. So I just want to actually, before I get to that, I want to digress for a minute because we've talked a little bit about the beginnings. and this may sort of be an ending question, but I want to get it out there now in terms of, what do you wish you had known when you first started out that you know now? And I'll ask all of you that, but I'll start with Jane. Is there something that you wished you shared? All right.
My answer.
Is there something you wished you had known that you didn't when you started out?
That it's really not rocket science, that it's not, we're not all that special, that we're not all that important, that we, you know, that we have to support each other out in the field, because without each other in the trenches, no one has our back. In today's society, you're certainly not breaking stories. With Twitter, with blogging, with everything. So I think it's just the human part that I wish I respected more at the beginning, that as an older woman, I have now. And therefore, I nurture more, I respect more, and I really look at myself in the mirror now and go, wow, and, you know, what I do isn't really all that important, you know. I'm entertaining, I'm not saving lives, and I think you have to put it all into perspective of what we do, like love your job, but man, there's a lot of personalities out there that are bigger than life, and I don't really respect that. So, and I think it's important for women now to know that more than ever, to have each other's backs, because it is an ugly little social media market out there that you thinking, God, I didn't have when I was your age. So I try to be kind.
What do you mean by that?
I just
The trolls.
can't
Oh.
stand
So-
social media, so that's so I know you have to do it.
Yeah,
I know I'm kind of grandfathered out of it. I do certain things. I don't like to read things like you're old and fat and we need more so-and-sos that are the young ones in your Sports Center stable. We, you know, you asked a stupid question, or I hope your broadcast booth burns down tonight. Like, there's just people who are nameless and faceless and live in their basement with 10 cats and my parents' basement. That I don't even understand the hate
But
that
if
we
you
get
Google,
today.
if you Google your name, that stuff comes up.
I try not to.
No.
I really
Yeah.
try not to, and I think my husband promised me on certain big events like the Olympics that I go to, not to look, because much like a child of, say, grade 6, when you get bullied on the schoolyard and you don't know where to go, and it's just, it's stifling. I find that even at my age, with a beautiful family and a loving relationship, that I get so down when I read those things that I don't know where to go. And if I can't get through that, and I'm pretty stable on all other cylinders, that is full of bullying, and I don't like it, and just wish people would think before they start putting stuff down.
Well, and it's, you know, fair, when you have a quote-unquote dream job, there are going to be a lot of people who are sitting home thinking, any chimp with a mic can do it, you're an idiot, why don't I have that job? And they're pretty vocal about it. And everybody gets it, everybody in the industry gets it. But I want to ask Megan, though, as a woman, do you feel a little bit more vulnerable in terms of social media? And again, because you have to expose yourself to it, do you end up feeling a bit exposed sometimes?
I do, but I also, I'm going to answer this in 2 parts.
Sure.
The first part is that I wish when I first started that I had known that I would have to unplug and walk away once in a while. And I didn't learn that until I was at a low point, because it was just so overwhelming, because you do have to put yourself out there. When I was in Calgary, I was doing television and I was on the radio, and I was, you know, I was a public face, and that was really hard because I didn't have any privacy. People came up to me in Walmart when I was buying a microwave in my pajamas one time,
Like this.
and it was bananas. It was just bananas, and you know, so that was really tough. One of the things that I wish I'd known, though, was that you need to unplug. In saying that, though, some of my social media is very private. My Facebook is something that is not a public forum. It's just for the 170-something people that I went to university with, my family from different places, and very close friends, because that's my space. And I've created...
In the States, probably started that trend, and it's followed
Right.
here now, and that's, again, not me, but it'd be more your demographic or something. I ain't
But I
wearing a
see-
cocktail dress on.
Thank you. Yeah. But I think it's different for print people, it's different for reporters that are in the field, but I see people on the desk now, young women, dressing differently. Off the shoulder, chandelier earrings, it's like, where are you going? But I understand that there's probably, I'm sure that they feel a certain amount of pressure to look a certain way. And part of me, and it's like, you know what, because when I started, I wanted to look like my colleagues. You wanted to blend in, you wanted to be one of the colleagues. So I would wear suits. I wore suits to games, I wore suits on the air. And I noticed younger women starting to dress a little more like, and then I started to think, okay, maybe I can wear a dress. I'll put a jacket on, maybe I'll wear a dress. And part of me thought, well, good, because you shouldn't have to apologize for being a woman, and it's okay to be feminine. But then there reaches a point too where I start to wonder though, because I see it, the pendulum is swinging further and further this way, and I'm wondering, is that attitude freeing us or enslaving us to tougher and tougher standards for people to meet, for women to meet in the industry?
Do you think women in politics are having the same problem?
Yes.
Like Ryerson and all those people, do you think?
Yes, because everybody talks about how ugly Hillary Clinton is.
In her pantsuits.
And how hot Sarah Palin was.
I love my pantsuits. I have a whole closet of grays,
Now,
blues,
that's a
browns.
tip for you guys.
And they're so comfortable.
Pantsuits.
Don't underestimate the pantsuit. And again, I dress the role. I believe in a power suit. I think I look good in a power suit. I feel good in a power suit, so that's my comfortable spot. I respect a woman that comes into a locker room wearing a power suit. I certainly don't respect a woman that comes in with half of her belly showing. The men love it. The men, oh, it's happened. Happened in the Raptor room a lot last year.
Yeah.
And the boys love it, like they love it. But I actually can't even,
But at one point, that would have been
because it's
considered
so old school.
unprofessional, but almost now, I feel like
Yeah.
women are under more pressure to attract that kind of attention because it gets viewers,
I've been told to lose weight, dye my hair blonde.
You?
Yeah, and dress differently. I did a couple of auditions on a set a while back, and had my makeup done for me. False eyelashes for the first time in my life. To be in sports, what do I need false eyelashes for? I mean, I didn't know how to put them on, so I had to have somebody else do it for me. And I'm not blessed with lovely eyelashes like
Mine are
Sherry.
I
So, you know, like, why can't I just be myself? When I first got back in, trying to be in contact with Toronto, I had full bangs and long hair, and I loved my haircut. But they were like, no, grow your bangs out. We need to see more of your forehead if you ever want to be on television. Why can't I just be Megan Robinson?
Because sadly, it's a visual area. I mean, TV is visual,
Totally.
so whether you like it or not, the older women don't have a home on TV rarely in sports anymore. Rarely. It's very rare. There's hardly any of us. But there's many young ones. Whereas in print, they respect an older woman. It's just how it goes. It's a visual medium, and you really can't.
I just don't want to look like I'm going to a cocktail.
No,
party.
Did you feel that, Jane? Like, were you ever conscious about what you were wearing when you started out, and have you noticed a change? And
Well, I was in print. I was never, I did some, I do some TV spots and be on panels and things, but.
But even as a woman in print, when you're going into locker rooms.
No, I was pretty badly dressed. I don't think I had much, I wasn't fashion forward back then.
You probably would have
That
fit
way.
in with all the other print journalists.
No, I
Their
think
dockers and jeans.
I think I was just pretty, I wasn't really girly, in any way, shape, or form. It just wasn't who I was, so.
And I wasn't stating that for you.
Oh, no,
I was
I
stating
know.
that for them because
Yeah.
you know that already. But it's sad, that's how it is.
I would
That's
like to just point out something. I work with Sherry a lot. And I met Sherry in the Toronto Maple Leafs dressing room this season. And something that Sherry does, that she's very humble about all of this, but I've looked up to Sherry for a long time, but I like the way that she asks questions because you're a bulldozer, and I love that about you. And she's very elegant about the way that she works things because she gets good answers. And if you've ever watched an interview with Sherry, really pay attention. She asks good questions, and even if people are trolling her on the internet to say that she doesn't, she does. And I look up to you.
I pay her very well.
So I just wanted to say that about your question asking, no matter what any trolls on the internet say.
So we sort of talked about some of the issues, being women externally in terms of the way we dress and stuff like that. But I wanted to ask all of you to think about this in terms of, were your biggest challenges in the office or in the field? Are and were they?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna state both because, it's different in every job, and I've done many jobs. I would say out in the field, when I started, much like probably when you started, you get the odd athlete that, I remember walking into a Saskatchewan Rough Rider dressing room once where a guy by the name of Demetrius Bendros yelled across the room many things, one of which I'll repeat, there's a girl in here and she's just in here to see my ding-a-ling. And I've been in the business for 5 years by then, but I guess he'd never seen a woman in a dressing room. Or even when I came into Hamilton, there was a time in the Hamilton dressing room. And you know what, I should preface this, I really like CFL players, they're really good people. It just sounds like, it just sounds like I'm getting bad at them, but there was and I'd had a baby at this point. And I don't know what the kid was thinking, but I'm sitting in the middle of the locker room on my BlackBerry writing my script, and this person comes up to me and he is naked, and he whips his penis underneath my, can I say penis?
Sure.
Underneath my BlackBerry. Just dangled it there back and forth, and I'm like, really? So I think those days don't happen anymore.
No, thankfully not.
So I've had some bad times in the locker rooms, not maybe as many as you and some of the ladies that came at that time, like Rosie or whomever, especially in baseball, because they're the worst. So where is the women doing baseball?
It does
back
differ
in that
from sport
time?
to sport, by the way.
Very much so. But in the office, I would say, the office to me has always been the hardest spot, because in TV, you are a commodity. It's not necessarily how you write or what you do, you're a commodity. And if they want a blue pen that day, and you're a green pen, you're kind of screwed. So I would say to anyone who has to be in an office, atmosphere of an office, is to never look at the people around you and go, wow, they get that assignment, or wow, they get that assignment. Don't look at what other people are getting ever, or where they are, or what their pay grade is. Always be happy with what you have, what you're hustling after, what your next story is, where you've been, what your end product is, and how you feel at the end of the day, or end of a career, or end of a year, or whatever. Because if you're going to look at everyone around you and wish that you had what they had, it is not a fair business. It is not on any level a fair business. So do yourself a favor and only look at yourself.
And Megan, when we were talking about sort of where we've been, where we are, where we're going, so
It was great to hear from everybody. Everyone has a different perspective, obviously, so it was really fascinating to hear from all of you. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming. A couple of things. We do have some food and drink available just next door here, and we can hang out here and mingle for a little while. I know that Jennifer and I will be here till the bitter end, so we're happy to hang out with whoever wants to hang out. And yes, and thank you to Ryerson for hosting us as well, and to April for all your help and welcoming us. It's been a great experience to be back here.
and thank you to all the men who turned up.
Another thing, we are hoping to have another event in the next June. We're looking at, I think. It may be another casual pub night. We haven't quite figured that out yet, but I'm going to give you our email address, if you can remember this or jot it down. For those of you who aren't on my list, I know some of you are getting my annoying emails for now, but if you're not, it's wins.toronto@gmail.com. So send us your contact info. We'll put you on our distribution list. We're also on.
Standing up behind her dad.